When buying from Amazon, you might think that all products come directly from the manufacturer to Amazon warehouses, but that's not always the case. Learn how to spot potential counterfeit products and protect yourself and your brand on Amazon. Today's guest is David Cooper. David is the CEO and founder at IP Secure that is an innovative new way to protect your intellectual property on Amazon, control your sales channel, and ensure that every purchase of your product on Amazon is a positive and repeatable shopping experience. He has spent 20 years building and deploying brand protection solutions for hundreds of global brands such as the NFL, J&J, Apple, and Rolex. I'm your host, Chris Parker, and this is the Easy Prey Podcast. Dave Cooper, thanks for coming on the Easy Prey Podcast today.
Chris, thanks for having me.
So I'd like for you to give the audience a little background about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I'm the CEO and founder of IP Secure. And IP Secure is a brand protection company with a focus and an emphasis on Amazon. And it was born out of my 2 decades in the intellectual property space, building brand protection programs with many of the largest companies in the world, folks like Nike and Microsoft and the National Football League and others. And when I left that space, or I left that company in that industry specifically, I created IP Secure as a way to address some of both the shortcomings that I feel like exist in the space and have existed historically, and also to, I think, expand the markets and the types of companies and people that perform brand protection, which in turn makes the online space a lot safer place for people to shop.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely all gotten those emails for the Louis Vuitton handbag for only $29.95.
Yes. Yeah, that's, I mean, the internet is fertile ground. And when you have platforms like Amazon, that are, literally as large as the top 30 or 40 countries on the planet, in terms of GDP, there's so much commerce activity occurring there that it's basically irresistible for counterfeiters or unauthorized sellers, bad guys of lots of flavors. Mm-hmm. And so the need for solutions and strategies to approach this problem are just increasing, right? As the internet expands and e-commerce continues to expand. And we have a long way to go. I don't know if you know this, but e-commerce is a massive, massive space, but it's still a fraction of the size of total retail.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So e-commerce, it still has, decades of growth ahead of it, theoretically. And that's both exciting and scary when we think about some of the problems we're dealing with.
So is there kind of like 3 levels of addressing it? Let's talk about counterfeit and counterfeit brands, kind of 3 levels of it. There's the consumer perspective, there's the platform perspective, and then there's the brand's responsibility.
Yeah, I think, that's true. From a legal perspective, historically, the brand owner or the owner of the intellectual property, right, the trademark, the copyright, the patent, the IP associated with the product, inevitably, at least in the United States, has real legal responsibility, right, to protect that IP, and that means stopping counterfeiting when possible. Over the 2 decades that I was leading a company called Mark Monitor, we inevitably became the world's leader in online brand protection. And we focused almost exclusively on large brands and corporate legal departments.
Yeah.
Because, they, as we just said, really have a legal responsibility to protect their IP proactively. And they also have really a risk mitigation strategy to protect their consumers, which is really about liability in the long run, but also the dilution of their brand and lost sales. Historically, solutions in this space were almost exclusively legal focused. Mm-hmm. So, scraping large amounts of data, right, putting it into a data lake, a system that would enable an analyst to manually go in and look at it, and then bring it to the client and say, look, here's someone on, a platform Looks like they're selling a product. We think it's counterfeit. Let's go do something about it. And it became really a managed service.
Yeah.
Right. It became an industry full of technology providers who were really selling you people to analyze data, help you make a decision, and then take actions. And what occurred to me was that when I would go to, big brands that I worked with and I met with those corporate legal departments, is right down the hall was a whole team of e-commerce sales and marketing experts looking at the exact same platforms and thinking about the problems in very different ways.
Yeah.
Right. Unauthorized sales and counterfeits were really a threat to their growth, to their sales, to their success. Legal looks at it and sees almost pure risk mitigation. Right. I have to stop this risk from impacting the business. IP Secure was born out of both, I think, a necessity and a conscious strategy to bring those groups together, to use traditional brand protection techniques like IP violation reporting, cease and desist letters, test purchases, litigation eventually, if that's where it goes, and combine those with a platform that was highly simplified to hopefully expand our audience. And then more importantly, really change the way we measure return on investment or success. So today, if you partner with a brand protection company in your corporate legal department, they'll show up probably once a month and talk to you about all the stuff they did. They'll say, look at all the bad guys we found. Look, hundreds of them, took them all down, sent all these letters, did all this stuff. It feels great because, these problems are big, right? There's a lot of people to chase. But it has no impact from a business standpoint on the health of the long-term health of your business. You don't really understand the impact of this, especially if every time you remove 100 new guys show up.
A game of whack-a-mole.
Exactly. So companies started measuring their own success based on how much whack-a-mole, right? If my problem's this big, I really want to do a lot of stuff. And I get it, that doesn't go away. However, we feel like there's a much better way to measure success when you're protecting your brand online. And that's really, are the good guys selling more? So what IP Secure does is really measures everyone within the ecosystem, not just the bad guys. So we look across, for instance, Amazon's entire ecosystem and can tell you everyone offering and selling a particular product. And then we score every seller based on user-driven criteria. And so if you have a channel of licensees, if you sell direct to consumer on Amazon, even if you're a mass market retailer like a Procter & Gamble, where you're selling to distributors who are then selling to retailers, understanding the entire landscape of everyone selling your products on Amazon enables you to start measuring the good guys against the bad guys. And as you purge them from the platform using those brand protection techniques we talked about, simplified, of course, in our system, what happens is it's like a balloon. You push on one side and the other side of the balloon starts to rise. So the people will keep coming to Amazon to purchase the products. The key is who's in the buy box, what sellers are there with offers at that point in time. And if you're the only person there, or the core group of good guys or the only group that's there, the end result is an increase in your revenue.
Yeah.
And so for IP Secure, that's how we measure success, not how many letters you send.
I think that's always been kind of one of the challenges of the compliance side of things. My wife works in compliance, and she's often asked by the management of like, how can you, if you did, there's less compliance actions. Does that mean things are better? Well, it's
right.
It's hard to prove a negative. Well, we staved off a lawsuit. We how much theft did we prevent, or how much, intellectual property theft did we prevent? I don't know. It's like you can't quantify what didn't happen. So I like that analysis of looking at the way that you're looking at it. Of like, well, is the good sales, the legitimate sales, is the overall business growing in spite of knocking out the whack-a-moles?
Yeah, it's a known unknown, and you can try to quantify it, but the reality is a particular case of IP infringement could cost a company, a very small amount of money, or it could cost them an enormous amount. because every single instance of that infringement is not equal, right?
Yeah.
And doesn't have the same impact and require the same response to it. And so it's kind of 80-20. You have this whole huge list of bad guys doing bad things. And what you want is your best resources and your most expensive resources focused on the top 10% of the problem.
Yeah.
Right. Where we know people are selling product, having an impact, putting consumers at risk, siphoning off revenue. And then you have this long tail of people that are just floating around, almost like gnats. And I think that's where you need a lot of automation and heavy lifting to help you go out and tackle it. But your point is well made, which is there needs to be intelligence behind the actions that we're taking, because if it's activity just for activity's sake, at some point people turn around and say, well, what are we doing? We're removing the same 100 people, and 100 new ones show up. Whack-a-mole gets frustrating over time. And so we created the business really to help kind of disrupt that stalemate and give people a better way of measuring their success. We've also created a platform that is uniquely designed with a consumer almost like app in mind, because we wanted it so simple that people from sales, marketing, e-commerce, people outside of legal would not be intimidated. I don't know if you've ever logged into a legal SaaS system before, but it's intimidating and there's a lot happening. And so we really wanted to create something that could be much more broadly adopted. And that's what we're seeing happening. And we're seeing brand protection even create new markets where, things like Amazon agencies, performance marketing companies. I don't know if you're familiar with aggregators. It's a very up and coming space, right? VC funded businesses that are scooping up brands on Amazon by the dozens and consolidating their fulfillment and their e-commerce operations. We've gone to all the players in these markets and said, you can white label our tech. You need brand protection for yourselves to protect your products and your investment. But if you're in the business of enabling others to sell on Amazon, right, or buying small businesses that are already there, take brand protection with you and offer that as a value proposition to your customers. And we've seen phenomenal levels of interest and growth on that side of our business because, again, people think it's just for IP attorneys, and it isn't. And counterfeiting isn't the only use case, by the way. A big part of our users are using our system to manage their own licensees and resellers. They bring on board someone, they give them the rights to sell online on Amazon, but only for certain products and only in certain ways, right? And only in some cases within certain price ranges. And so, these contracts need to be monitored and enforced. And that's another large use case is not just finding counterfeiters and getting rid of them, but communicating with the good guys and saying, hey, maybe change your behavior a little bit.
So let's talk a little bit about the counterfeiting, and then we'll talk about some of the kind of the reseller behavior and those sort of things.
Yeah.
Because we do have a lot of end users and consumers listening to the podcast. Yeah. What are the things that consumers should be looking for in terms of, I think this is a counterfeit product. To me, I kind of think it's no brainer if you see a Louis Vuitton bag for $29.95 as opposed to $29.95. It's probably not a real Louis Vuitton. But what should consumers be looking for other than, it's 99% off?
It's a good question. And I think there are some elements people can look at which are universal when you're buying online. And then there are some that are frankly specific to Amazon, which is almost 50 cents of every e-commerce dollar now spent in the United States is spent on Amazon. So I can touch a little bit on both.
Yeah, let's do it.
I think generally you want to look for data points that help you understand legitimacy, longevity, and reputation. Can you contact them? Do they have a phone number? Do they have a reputation on that platform? If it's a third-party platform like Amazon, we look at the quantity of their negative reviews. We look at the total quantity of reviews because we see a lot of sellers show up, that's a new account. They have 5 reviews, very high negatives. They're there selling product for a few weeks and they disappear. So I think on Amazon, you really want to look at, does it look like a legitimate business that's been operating there for quite a while, has a reputation that you can identify through a lot of the metrics that Amazon presents to you. But I think on Amazon in particular, part of the challenge is that the way their platform is architected, most people don't know who they're buying from, right? They get there, they look at the listing, they see the product, and they click buy now. What they don't understand is there's a rotating algorithm that's pushing sellers in and out of that buy box. So you may buy from Jim one day and Sally the next, and you don't know why that is. And it's because Amazon has a special algorithm they use to determine who they want that winner to be. So at any point in time, people get duped into buying from sellers, and they think, I got it on Amazon, I click buy it now, it must be okay. So I think from a consumer perspective, you really want to look at the listing, and then below that the buy it now button, it'll say, ships and sold by XYZ company. And, you can click on their name and look at their profile and determine how long they've been on the platform. And, are they selling a lot of products? Do their consumer reviews seem real? This is important to do. And I would also say that the use case here isn't, the Louis Vuitton handbag. The use case here, and we do hundreds of test buys a month, are household staples, OTC pharmaceuticals, like Tylenol. They're products people buy every day because on Amazon, bad guys hide in plain sight. And it's very difficult for people to tell exactly who they're buying from. I tell my wife, to really look at the seller, drill in, and when in doubt, don't purchase there. Because she and I have this conversation frequently, especially around the holidays when she's buying a lot of gifts online. I say, instead, go to the manufacturer's website directly if you can. I mean, that's always the safest thing to do because marketplaces can deceive you, not necessarily intentionally, but it's quite easy to be deceived. I bought my wife a camera a couple of years ago, I remember, and the camera was authentic. It was a Samsung camera. It was an, SLR. It had the really nice lens, and it was this expensive camera. And it came, and I opened the box, and the manual was in Portuguese because it's what we call a parallel import. It's an authentic product that Samsung manufactured for sale and market in the Brazilian market, right? And so it had a different price point, and I mean everything about it from a business standpoint was different, but the product was basically the same.
Yeah,
and that's a big issue for companies like Samsung. They lose a lot of money to parallel imports. So I guess what I'd say as a consumer is know who you're buying from and pay attention to it, whether you're using the app or the platform. And when in doubt, try to go directly to a manufacturer's website. I think that's always the safest thing to do.
And I know some people will say, like, with respect to the Samsung camera, of like, well, what do you care? You got a legitimate Samsung camera for, maybe it was a little bit cheaper than you would have paid if you had gotten the US version. My scenario of having it was a home security camera that I thought it was the US version. When I got it, it turned out that it wasn't the US version. And when I tried to do a firmware update, it bricked the device, contacted the manufacturer for warranty, and they go, well, while that is legitimately one of our products, there was not a product that was destined to be sold in the United States, so there is no warranty for it. If you want to send it at your own expense down to Brazil, and then they can send it to us, we'll honor the warranty that way, but you're going to have to pay for international shipping to Brazil to replace a $99 camera, whatever it was. And then you got to pay for it to get back to you. So it was like, to me as the consumer, it wasn't that this wasn't a legitimate product, but that once I wanted warranty service on it, we're not going to honor it.
Well, what's interesting is that services that come with a product are in essence considered part of that product. So one of the techniques we work a lot with legal folks on is, in the United States, there's something called the first sale doctrine, right? Which means that if I walk into Walmart, I buy a product, I can go home, I can put it on the internet, I can sell it. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, I can't sell it and use, let's say, images from your website, right? That's using your IP, and that's different. That goes a little bit too far. But in terms of just selling it online, there is nothing wrong with that. And that's totally, allowed. But to address the gray market problem, right? Because a lot of gray market sellers are hiding behind that for sale doctrine. And one of the ways that we help coach our customers and work with legal counsel on is by looking at those service elements. So if I acquire a large quantity of an electronics product and I put it on Amazon, and as the seller, I don't offer a warranty that's similar, customer support that's the same, service elements that the manufacturer clearly offers and advertises in association with that product, then the argument legally could be made in court that the product's different.
Yeah.
It's not the same. It's different. And you can attack it almost like a counterfeiting case, or pretty close to it. So, but again, these remedies are expensive.
Yeah.
And a lot
I'm not going to do that over a $99 camera.
Right. And a lot of the companies that we work with, I mean, some are very, very big, but many of them are small. I mean, many of them are have a handful of products they sell on Amazon. They're a $5 million, a $10 million, or $20 million business, and they can't afford to lose 30% of their sales, to counterfeiters and gray market sellers.
Yeah.
And I hear that story every day. They call us up and say, "What can we do?" And of course, we help them as best we can, but it's very challenging for folks. Mm-hmm. And again, that's a big part of why people need to understand that there's things they can do. You don't have to hire a lawyer, by the way, to send a cease and desist letter. There's nothing that says you have to do that. You own the brand. It's your company. Send that letter. I mean, it's okay. And so a big part of it, I think, is coaching people that there is more you can do. Mm-hmm. But Amazon especially is very challenging because there's such a huge ecosystem and there's so many avenues for folks like, if you have a consumer complaint, right, versus you're a brand owner, you're going different places and processes and systems, and it's quite confusing. Mm-hmm. So just helping people, I think, maybe navigate some of that complexity is also, part of what we're helping with.
Yeah. Are there avenues for, let's say, for brands that, they've decided we've decided that we're not going to sell our product through Amazon. So where they can say, hey, Amazon, anything that comes on your platform that's branded as us is an unauthorized transaction. Are there means for that?
No. I mean, Amazon is thousands of flea markets open 24/7. Mm-hmm. Anyone can come and go for the most part. They do take some steps relative to products that involve consumer safety. They are proactive in certain areas with certain brands. But generally speaking, no. And that's a problem. So I think even for Nike's a great example. I mean, they very publicly invested a lot in Amazon, built a store, had a partnership, pulled out. Mm-hmm. And pulled all of their, at least from their perspective, legitimate product listings off of Amazon. So we're not going to be on this at all. Mm-hmm. Nike is still the number one most searched keyword on Amazon.com. So, now Nike's strategy in the end has worked amazingly well because they're geniuses at e-commerce and they've created their own ecosystem, which is doing really well. But the reality is most brands, I actually wrote a blog post on this a couple of months ago, most brands are not Nike.
Yeah.
And to turn your back on Amazon completely and think you're going to find success is going to be immensely challenging, unless you're in the luxury space or you're where the core demographic isn't shopping there. But for most brands, love it or hate it, you got to be there, or mass market retailers, right? If you talk to Unilever, or a Procter & Gamble or a mass market retailer, they don't know who's selling on Amazon. They know they have distributors and they sell to them and then they sell to others and so on and so forth. So for any brand to say, I'm consciously not selling there, I don't think is true. Whether you like it or not, your products are being sold there. And so if you choose not to participate in that commerce, that's your decision. But these things are going to get sold irrespective. And so I think our philosophy is we can measure that whether you're a part of it or have, skin in the game, so to speak, or not. Because at the end of the day, what we don't want is other problems to arise, even if you don't care about the revenue aspect of lost sales. There's really liability that you need to mitigate, right? Depending on what you're selling. And so the last thing people want is to buy, baby products from China that haven't been tested and haven't gone through the same, regulatory scrutiny, right, that products manufactured here do. And so there are real risks to consumers and to people. So, and I've been doing this for 25 years, and I have not walked into a meeting with a brand or a company who says we don't care about it. I think there's levels of caring and willingness to act, but nobody says it's not important. Yeah. I mean, Amazon is half of every dollar in the United States spent online. So if you're not monitoring it actively, I really question what business you're in. It certainly isn't related to the internet, I would think.
Now, I know that Amazon is your primary focus. Is it the same sort of issues with like Alibaba, maybe even more so?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is because the focus for IP Secure really is, legal e-commerce joining and ROI based on healthy e-commerce growth. Mm-hmm. For us, we want to focus on platforms where our U.S. clients are making investments proactively, right? Gotcha. So Amazon, Walmart is another one that they're looking at.
eBay at all?
No. Surprisingly for me, eBay's not one of them. I mean, how many branded stores do you know that are on eBay?
I haven't been on eBay in 20 years, so
right.
But one of my good friends, like, he buys everything on eBay.
This is a big difference culturally between IP Secure and other vendors. They want to they'll cover hundreds of platforms for you because that's where the infringements are, and their job is to find infringements and remove them, and then it's over. So sure, if I was any other vendor, I would, of course, cover Alibaba because there's so much infringement and counterfeiting activity there. I don't know anyone. I've never met anyone in the United States that goes to Alibaba, by the way, and buys products on an active basis. But I understand why it's important from an infringement standpoint. The problem is you can only measure success there, again, through activity because there's no legitimate commerce occurring, right, for you to boost or measure. Mm-hmm. So we're going to focus on Amazon, Walmart, probably Shopify, TikTok, places that we know U.S. brands, which is our primary focus anyway, are investing and see future growth. It's not Alibaba, at least not today.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily expecting that you'd be like, oh yeah, that's our second biggest platform that we manage. I mean, that's
yeah. Well, a lot of them do. I mean, again, because for the other competitors in our space, part of their value proposition is we cover hundreds of platforms. Well, how can that's another sort of issue I have. Our system integrates very heavily with Amazon, which enables us to get access to unique data, to have a granular perspective that others can't achieve because they've built massive scraping systems that work across hundreds of different platforms, languages, currencies. I mean, you name the complexity, it exists there. And so, it's like being, the jack of all trades and the master of none, because their business is volume of takedowns. Our business is really boosting your business, right? Showing you how to turn brand protection into an e-commerce growth driver.
Yeah, you're looking at it from a different perspective. You've tied in the sales element to it, where legal compliance is. Our goal is to stop bad stuff. You're saying, well, the other side of the equation, we need to see sales go up.
Yeah, or why not? I mean, you're doing it anyway.
Yeah,
right. You're saying we have to protect ourselves on Amazon, on these other platforms. Well, okay, but why would you only sort of measure the success of that effort based on quantity of activity when that just doesn't really speak to anything important? Mm-hmm. So it's a different approach, and I think it's important because it's the DNA of the company. Mm-hmm. We look at everything through the lens of really, frankly, economic return on investment for the client. Not how many letters can they send, and it's a very different approach.
Do you see Amazon getting, I don't want to say getting into this space, because I don't see Amazon as a company say, we're going to put our core, our Q4 goal is going to be to stamp out counterfeit on our platform. It's kind of, they're not really I don't want to say that they want to promote counterfeit, but in some sense, if anything that is sold on Amazon is to their benefit because they're going to get a piece of the sale. So they're not entirely on brand's side, so to speak, when it comes to dealing with infringement. Do you see them moving to be more helpful?
I will say this. No other platform does more.
Okay.
It's by a mile. They're spending, the last public sort of accounting of this that I saw, which probably was last year, is well over $500 million a year. They have armies of people. They have, they have counterfeit crime unit investigators partnering with brands to file lawsuits against bad guys. They are doing a lot. I think, could they do more? Of course they could do more. But certainly I don't believe anyone can criticize them for a lack of willingness to do a lot. And I applaud them for that. I think the challenge they have is they've made e-commerce so easy. And they've grown so massive. You're talking about up to, in some cases, 4,000 new sellers a day are joining their ecosystem. So they're a victim of their own success. Yeah. And I think there's also an element of, cost versus risk for them, right? I think in the very early stages, like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, Amazon cared a lot less about these problems because the impact wasn't as public. It wasn't as serious, it wasn't as understood, right, by both legislators and Congress people and the public. It just wasn't. And today, people understand these problems in much greater detail. And hear about it and see it and read about it on a constant basis. And so I think that has created a level of awareness, which has forced them to act in a pretty aggressive manner. I also believe they don't want bad actors on their platform. It's not good for business. Yeah,
if people don't trust Amazon, they're not going to buy anything from Amazon. It's not like I'm just not going to buy my Cheerios from Amazon. It's I'm not going to buy anything from them if I don't trust them.
The problem is that they're just so huge, and getting their arms around it is extremely challenging. And I think there are some technical limitations. And at the end of the day, you're right. They're in the business of recruiting more sellers, selling more products, and generating more transactions. That's their business model. So will they ever completely, cut off third-party selling on their platform? No, never.
It's never.
I think it will be interesting to see, though, how Congress views the issues. I think Amazon, in some ways, has benefited from a world that's been full of lots of other more important things, pandemics and wars, obviously. But prior to that, if you remember, Amazon was very much on the radar of legislators and Section 230 and all these other things that, are laws that help Amazon. And there's I wrote about an antitrust effort recently that's underway, looking at Amazon and their business, because they not only sell direct to consumer, but they have this third party marketplace. And in a lot of cases, those do not coexist in a very, harmonious way. Right. And so Congress is taking a long look at this. I think, I don't think it's going to happen relatively soon, but at some point, people are going to say, look, can you be one of the largest retailers on the planet and control this massive third-party marketplace where you could almost in some ways really dictate a lot of how, things are priced and sold and bought and consumed? It's a very interesting issue. But in the interim, I have to applaud Amazon. Nobody is doing as much as they are to try to solve these issues. But, they're a victim of their own success. The easier they make it for us to buy stuff and sell stuff, the more the bad guys are going to rush in there and try to capitalize.
Yeah, and they're always going to have to draw a line in the sand somewhere. They can't say, like you said, There's no way they can be in the position of saying we're not going to allow third-party resellers. That's just or to set the bar so high that
in the world.
Yeah,
they can't authenticate it. Even if Amazon said, okay, all brand owners, we will take responsibility for policing your brand on our platform. How's that going to work?
Yeah.
Amazon doesn't understand their trademarks, their brands, their supply chains, their licensees, their personal feelings, right? One company's trademark infringement is another company's, 5-alarm fire. So, these are things where I think Amazon is going to do everything they can within reason to partner with the companies that sell on their platform and then look externally to companies like IP Secure where, we have an incentive to build a system that's really easy to use and then get it as broadly adopted as possible, which in the end is something that really helps Amazon's platform. And so I think we coexist, quite nicely with them.
Yeah, it's not something that they have to build themselves also.
Sure. And they do have lots of tools. I mean, there are tools on their platform for brand owners and for sellers, and there's all sorts of ways to report various violations. And our platform integrates with many of those. But the challenge, again, is it's very complex. It's a lot of moving parts. Most people are trying to run a medium or small business on Amazon, don't have a lot of bandwidth, right, to read and do all the work necessary to kind of get up to speed on this, because it's not Amazon's core focus, right? Their core focus is e-commerce. Our core focus is simplifying these complex processes so anyone can be a brand protection person.
And so what is kind of your target business that you're looking for as customers? Is it Fortune 500 companies or mom and pop manufacturers that sell, 40 widgets a year? Kind of where's your sweet spot of kind of the customer that you can help the most?
That's a great question. We have technology and programs for all of them. I think from my perspective, I actually believe that the small and medium-sized market benefits in a larger way from using our system, primarily because they are smaller. We're mitigating the risk, I think, and we're taking effective action, which is preserving a larger percentage of their revenue. Mm-hmm. They simply can't afford, as I think I said in my earlier example, they can't afford to lose, 5, 10, 20% of their business, to unauthorized sellers. So for them, the focus is to get tools they can control and deploy in the most cost-effective way possible, right? Because they can't afford to go out and, get really expensive lawyers and do all the things that a Nike can do, right? In terms of assembling an army of technology tools and then specialists. And so I think for IP Secure, again, we're doing two things. We're expanding the market, right, outside of just legal. And we're also making our platform accessible and cost effective. So even the very small businesses can afford to use it. I work with a company, it's a vitamin supplement company. They have about 17 products on Amazon. To put it in context, they might spend a few $100s a month with us to monitor and protect themselves on Amazon, and they're covered. It's all they need. We have others that have 20,000 products, right, on Amazon and are using our system. And of course, spending quite a bit more, but it's very cost effective because we're pure SaaS. We don't, my competition, as I kind of talked a little bit about at the beginning of the call, because they're trying to be everything to everyone, almost everything they do is manual and services based. And so for them, their costs are really high. Yeah. We're SaaS, which means we give you the tools. If you want help and services, we have that. We can provide it. But it's not the core focus of the business. The core focus is taking our tools, white labeling them, simplifying them, and then pushing them out of the marketplace. We like to kind of look at ourselves as the Slack of brand protection. We are taking kind of a different approach, right? And so I think for us, it's definitely the small and medium-sized market. And it's also the companies that facilitate commerce. So agencies are a big focus. Amazon aggregators, companies like that are a big focus for us.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm glad that there are products to help. I mean, I'm a big fan of small businesses, and it's nice to know that people are building products and services to not just help the Fortune 500 companies protect their, multi-billion-dollar brands, but that you've got a product and a service that's going to help, protect my next door neighbor's small business and help them to be able to make sure that their products on Amazon are legit and the way they want them to be represented.
Oh yeah, I can't tell you, Chris, how many business owners I've talked to. There was someone reached out to us recently who does cell phone cases, and they have this kind of really unique patented cell phone case that has some lights and things on it, and it was used on a reality TV show, and that generated a massive influx of sales. So her company went from about $500,000 a year in sales to $5 million to $10 million really quick, and that's great. What an awesome thing. However, at the same time, counterfeiters, primarily from China, parts of Asia, very, very quickly moved in within days.
Yeah.
Because they don't even need to have the product. If you're a manufacturer overseas who already makes cell phone cases, you're not worried about actually acquiring product. You just start building listings, right? You just start building this network of content that says, I have it. And then you get an order and you figure out how to make it. Or it literally is quite that simple in some cases. So it's important, I think, to partner with these smaller businesses because they need to start early. If you're defending yourself early and you're sending the message on Amazon or anywhere else that you're going to send letters, you're going to file takedown notices, you're going to do test buys, you're going to defend yourself more proactively. It acts as a deterrent.
Yeah.
Because they can counterfeit anyone's cell phone case. Maybe they'll go choose someone else. If you're defending yourselves, if you make it known. If you don't, the problem grows like a snowball real quick. And then it's almost impossible for you to kind of wind it all the way back down to zero. It actually probably is impossible at that point.
And I'm not a lawyer, and so I'll ask a question from I heard a lawyer say type of perspective. With copyright, with trademark and patent, you as the holder have you really have a responsibility to enforce it. It's not like the FBI is going to say, hey, someone's infringing on Dave's patent. Let's go out and do something about it. You as the creator are the ones that are responsible for that, right?
That's right. And you need to do what is quote unquote reasonable. So a great way of thinking about this is, again, 10 or 15 years ago, you could probably in a legal setting get away with manually searching Google or manually searching platforms for counterfeits, for unauthorized use of your IP. Today, I think if you're a larger brand or even a medium-sized brand, it to me would be problematic if you were in a legal venue and you said, I'm just doing Google searches manually to try to solve this problem. I don't think that's reasonable anymore because there's so many software tools available, both from third parties like IP Secure, but also directly with most of these platforms. I mean, just go to the platform. If you're willing to spend the time to more actively police your IP, you can do that. So there is this like changing element of what's reasonable. And that changes over time. So, yes, you have to actively be protecting your IP. Theoretically, if you're not, you could lose rights to it in the future. But the question is, what's reasonable, right? And there's real case law and litigation that exists both between Tiffany's and eBay is a big one. I mean, there's a number of them where they literally said, what is the brand owner doing? How many people do they have looking at this problem? Are they looking every day, every hour, once a year? You can't show up and say, well, I check online once a year for IP infringement. That's not reasonable relative to, most businesses and most situations. So, I mean, all these are legal concepts that get argued by lawyers in a legal venue, but our deep level understanding of this, having partnered with brands for 2 decades to kind of, work on these problems, means that we've been able to create technology now that's so cost effective that, we can scan and monitor millions of sellers within minutes. Within minutes. So it's not as challenging as it used to be because of the technology that's available.
I really love that when technology comes in and makes life easier for businesses, not makes it more complicated. particularly when it involves legal stuff, because I think legal insurance are the 2 of these platforms that seem to be very monolithic, paper driven. We're not going to change. We're just going to get more expensive as human beings get more expensive.
Yeah, I think that, again, legal is primarily about risk mitigation and the preservation of the business's core assets, which to me are IP in almost all cases. But it doesn't have to be that way. I work with a lot of corporate legal folks and even external firms that also view it the way that I do, which is, hey, brand protection can be something that actually generates revenue for the business, because we use it as one of the tools to control how consumers interact with us online, how we sell products, where we sell products. It touches almost every aspect of a company's online presence. And so to not think about it through a business lens, I think is really missing an opportunity. It sort of just tosses it in the legal side and says, just take care of it. And that's okay, I guess, for some businesses if the internet isn't critical to your success. But I don't know very many where it's not critical to their success. So I think attitudes are changing, but it's happening slowly. And so in the interim, as we try to convince legal folks that they can look at it, a little bit differently, we've brought it outside legal. We've said, well, let's bring it to everyone we think it impacts. And I can tell you that the e-commerce side loves it. They aggressively want to do brand protection. And I think legal, instead of maybe owning the function, is an advisor, right? Comes in and says, here's when you should use, the protection of our IP as a mechanism here. And let me provide some guidance and oversight and strategy. So we tend to think if businesses are really driving brand protection through e-commerce and through marketing, with legal having a really significant seat at the table, you're going to have more success than programs that are born in legal, run out of legal, and live in legal sort of in perpetuity. Yeah. They're never going to look at it through the lens of revenue growth.
That's in some sense, that's not their job.
Right, exactly, because no one's asking them. No one's asking them to.
Yeah.
And that's fine. That's totally intentional, I think, and makes sense. That's not their core competency. Their core competency is risk mitigation, right? Is protecting the assets. Yeah. So I guess what we want to do is both. There's no reason we can't do both.
Find the balance between the 2 of those. So if people want to find out more about the service that you guys provide, where can they find you online?
They just have to go to ipsecure.com and they can read about the business, who we are, where we've come from. They can also sign up and actually access a free account, which they can start using almost right away, or just reach out to us. And we're happy to talk, have dialogue, help anyone understand more about how they can do brand protection or how they can monetize it for their business, right? Again, if they're in one of the areas we talked about, like an agency or performance marketing firm.
That's awesome.
But ipsecure.com is the best place to reach us.
Perfect. Dave, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
My pleasure, Chris. Thanks so much for having me, and hope you have a great day.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Easy Pray podcast. Notes and a transcript of this episode with David Cooper can be found at easypray.com/113.